So I run a company in London called Nexus, a human-centered design company. And what we're really trying to do is focus on the technological connections between human and devices, apps and services. It's probably really important for me just to come out of the closet before I start and tell you all that I'm not a neuroscientist. And the neuroscientists out there usually hate me because I'm actually a pop scientist, which means I'm curious about science, but it's not actually my trade. I'm a designer. And I'm sure there's a fair few designers in the audience today, and more importantly, there's a whole bunch of us around the world that are creating services, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad. I'm also a father, and seeing my children playing with digital now really ignited something in me to want to know what exactly is that doing to them. And that's kind of one of the other reasons that I'm here. In the noughties, I was working in advertising, and we did a huge amount of work for some really big brands. And in about 2003, I was working on a piece of work for a big vodka brand. And they were encouraging us to do something called ZMET, the Zeitman Metaphor Elicitation Technique. Now, the Zeitman Metaphor Elicitation Technique, other than being a gobful, is actually something really quite scary. They worked out that logos and brand names elicit the same part of the same response in the brain as emotions. So what they actually were doing was they were doing advertising that was deliberately manipulating the brain. Now that got me thinking, is this good or is this bad? And so ever since these moments in advertising, what I've tried to do is migrate myself down a path of moral good with the work that we do rather than immoral bad. Quick lesson about the Swede. I love the Swede. The Swede's an amazing part of the body. It's really my trade. It's really all of our trades as designers. 3 parts of the brain. The reptilian part, which is the bit that deals with fight or flight. It's the oldest part of the brain. The neocortex, which really deals with kind of sensory perception, vision, motor commands, the really important stuff that stops us falling over. And then my favorite bit of the brain is the limbic section. Now, all the really good stuff happens in the limbic section. It's where we think that, memories and emotions are formed, where behaviors are kind of elicited, where rewards come from. It's kind of the Kim Kardashian of the brain area. It's really sex, drugs, and rock and roll, right? Now, this is the really important bit, so pay attention. Linear problem solving and non-linear problem solving. The work that we do in digital really falls into 2 camps. Linear problem solving, which is about making stuff quick, making stuff easier, and non-linear problem solving, which is really analytical, and creative, and things that make us smarter. It's what I call the solve or evolve paradigm. Now, what we've been doing over the last 10 years or so, especially since it became really easy for bedroom entrepreneurs to create apps, is flooding the market with a ton of this stuff on the left-hand side, the linear problem-solving apps. Okay, they're good, but they're not making us smarter. They're actually dumbing us down. It's another really interesting thing that we really ought to be aware of when we're flooding the market with these things, is the intense repetition of a task creates stronger neural pathways associated to that task. So the more that we do a linear task or a non-linear task, the brain actually learns and grows in that direction or the other. And so if you stop to think about the fact that we're flooding the market with apps that dumb us down, the brain is actually getting stupider. We are designing stupidity. And as an industry, that's what we've been doing, probably for the last 10 years, like en masse. We're designing stupidity, and we're releasing it out into the wild with very little kind of comprehension of what that could actually mean. I'm just going to give you a little example of this. So, bus drivers versus taxi drivers. I have nothing against bus drivers or taxi drivers, but they both have a part of the brain, as we all do, called the hippocampus. Now, bus drivers have a much smaller hippocampus, a smaller, understimulated hippocampus, because they solve linear problems every day. They drive backwards and forwards on the same route. And so they're a linear problem-solving species, the bus driver, whereas a taxi driver, they're creative problem-solving. They're making up their own adventure every day. And what I want us just to go away and think about is, do we want a society full of bus drivers, love you guys, or taxi drivers, you guys are smarter? And I think what we actually need is we need to start designing a world full of taxi drivers and not bus drivers. This is the other thing that I found out in the last kind of 5 years or so that really kind of ignited a new passion in me, which is, I didn't realize, and I don't know how many of you here realize, that apps and services and digital actually release hormones in us when we play with them. So the more linear tasks that we do, hormone release, the more non-linear tasks that we do, hormone release, and we think this is where the kind of addiction to digital is starting to come from. Now, this is another really important thing, is that, a hormone, like a steroid hormone that's released in all of these kind of digital pursuits, actually changes us physically and mentally. So think about this for a second. The more you play on your phone, you're actually changing your body on a micro level, on a kind of molecular level. And so it's really important, I think, that as an industry, as a bunch of people that are designing things, we're aware of the fact that we are releasing hormones every time you use your finger. and that you're creating good effects and bad effects when you're doing this. I'm going to take you through a little skit, through something that scientists and the design community are calling one of the most addictive services on the market. Now, I know for a fact that at least 1 in every 5 of you have this linear solving baby in their pocket right now, okay, amongst other problem-solving apps. Tinder. So Tinder is what people are calling one of the most addictive apps on the market. It's a new kind of dating ritual, which was really only designed kind of in the last few years with very little thought to what effect it might be having on people. They just got it out there because it's cool. And it's been doing some really amazing stuff. So this is a whole new, uncharted set of triggers, behaviors, and reactions. We're really designed in somebody's bedroom. Love at first swipe. So you found somebody on that little app in your pocket called Tinder, and you've swiped them to the right. Now, the minute you swiped with your thumb and you popped them into that like category, something really incredible started to happen inside you. When you first found those people, adrenaline started to surge through your body in one little tiny micro swipe of your thumb, closely followed by testosterone. Now, testosterone is a really fascinating hormone. It's a steroid hormone, but those two things combined have started to change you. Within milliseconds, we've totally re-engineered your body. Have a think about that just for a second. This is body re-engineering with your thumb, and you might think it's kind of scaremongering. But when we start to go through the stats of the usage of these things en masse, then it becomes really incredible. There's another interesting thing that some of you may not be aware of, which is that testosterone and adrenaline release is actually propagating out and affecting the person sitting next to you as well. So we're all getting addicted off each other when we're playing on these services. And then you're getting high off the person next to you, and they're getting high off you, and so on and so on and so on, which kind of leads back to some of the stuff that was talked about earlier about swarm. We're creating kind of phone drone swarms using something like Tinder. My other favorite effect of the testosterone feedback loop is something that we call winning and losing streaks. Now, we've replicated these effects in labs with athletes, and we think it's why an athlete, someone like Andy Murray, has a winning streak and a losing streak. What they're actually doing is the testosterone release is driving them. It's giving them an androgenic priming to be quicker, smarter, more appropriate in the sport or the pursuit that they're doing. The downside of that is when you start to lose, you crash bad. And this is another thing that we're seeing right now in people, especially the youth that are playing on these services for long periods of time, is that they crash quite heavily when that losing streak stops. One more doom and gloom moment, just about Tinder, is testosterone and adrenaline were really nature's way of making you run fast enough from a bear in the woods, like that's what it was designed to do inside the body. It really only it lasts for about 15 minutes, has a really sort of short half-life in the body, those two things. After 15 minutes, another hormone takes over, and this is the really nasty one. This one's called cortisol, and it's a stress hormone. Now, cortisol is really linked to depression and happiness, and it has one far-reaching command, which is glucose now. It starts to dismantle your body. It starts to eat you. And that's really the kind of, the scary thing that cortisol does. And that's, again, something that we're designing. So we went stalking on Tinder. We went trolling around some people. We managed to convince 81 people to come and have a chat to us about the things that they do. We managed to get 26 males, 38 females, 17 people have declined to specify their gender, but I can assure you they weren't cats or dogs. And really, we started to ask them some fascinating questions about their behavior. How long on average do you spend on services like Tinder? Guess what, folks? At least 28% of these people said that they were on it for 30 to 40 minutes. That means they are digesting themselves. They're sitting on their sofa, mating and digesting themselves using cortisol, which I find quite incredible. Now, thankfully, 24% are on it for 1 to 5 minutes, so they're the adrenaline junkies, and they're all good. Here's another incredible stat. This isn't all of it, by the way. I've got tons of this, and it's online. I find myself checking these services even before I receive that push. If this doesn't back up addiction to these services, I don't know what it is. 38% of people that agreed to answer the question said that they were checking the service before that ping. Now, the 39 people that skipped the question, a psychologist would say are feeling guilty, so we're going to put those in the sometimes category as well, right? So any of the sometimes or the skips, they're guilty. So that number at the top is pretty telling, I think. Do you find yourself behaving differently towards people than you would in real life? 60% of the people that answered the question, plus the 35% that didn't, or the 35 people that didn't, said yes, they do. They behave differently than they would in real life. Now, these are incredible things when you stop and think about it psychologically. They're aware of the fact that they're behaving differently, probably have a very little rationale about why they're behaving differently. But finally, my favorite one. I have an alter ego that takes over when I use services, like a secret online me. This is an incredible thing for people to come out and say. 86% of people are aware of the fact that they have a secret online me. Now, when we spoke to these people, they were feeling kind of irrational about it. We don't really know why, we just do. And I'm attributing it back to the chemical releases in their body when they're using services like Tinder. So this is my idea worth spreading, and this is why I'm bothering you with this Tinder story today, and why I'm here talking to you, and this is why Nexus exists. I believe it's within the gift of all of us that do design, that create services, that create apps, that sit down in our bedrooms and dream to create the right ones. We all have the gift of knowing that these things affect us morally, biologically, psychologically, and our children and the people sitting next to you. And therefore, when we stop and design these things, we should stop and think about designing them correctly. So Nexus is one of the examples that we have within our kind of philosophy is to create services that do not keep you addicted for more than 15 minutes. We'll literally shut a service down with a little message to say, come back in half an hour, go and have a cuppa. And so we're doing this with things like online banking. We have the gift, I think, to be able to create services that actually change people in a positive way. And that leads me to one of my final points, right, which is we are creating services that help industries, medicine, and things like mental health. So we have within us, and within our philosophy and within the products that we're creating, something that we're calling Big Hippo, which is using all of those biological anatomical effects that are induced by digital to start creating apps and services that basically reverse the effects of hippocampal atrophy. So hippocampal atrophy is something that we attribute back to people who are depressed. Their hippocampus is much smaller. The bus drivers. I'm sure all bus drivers are really unhappy, is basically what we're saying. I'm joking. But what we're doing is we're creating these services around this kind of philosophy of a bigger hippo, and trying to do kind of morally good things using all the anatomical and biological pushes and pulls that we're talking about. And now I'd just like to say thank you very much. Live long and prosper.